On behalf of the former members of Congress, pleased to welcome to the conversation on this very consequential election week two veterans of the House of Representatives, Republican Barbara Comstock from Virginia, Democrat Steve Israel from New York. To both of you, thanks so much for being with us. Representative Comstock, I want to begin with you because one of the storylines clearly was what happened in Virginia. Not only the victory for the Democrats, the margin of victory, and the down ballot races across the Commonwealth, and the additional seats in the House of Delegates for the Democrats. Give us your read on what happened and why, and what this means for your party, the Republicans.
Okay, well, Steve, great to be with everybody. And first, before we begin, I wanted to, as president of the former members of Congress, recognize the passing of Vice President Cheney earlier this week, actually on Election Day. He, of course, was a member of Congress first in his service, actually had been chief of staff also, and he was minority leader. Then he served as Secretary of Defense, and then, of course, as President George Bush's vice president, obviously a very consequential vice president and a very consequential leader and a man of service. And then also another very consequential leader this week, Nancy Pelosi announced that she is going to retire. So two very, very consequential leaders and people of service who, who are members of Congress. I just wanted to recognize those. So moving to, so much has happened this week, and along with that this week, elections this week in Virginia. Having been a member of the House of Delegates and served in the General Assembly before I was in Congress, this was a very big election in Virginia. Oh, excuse my dog here. And I can tell you, I actually was a Republican for Abigail Spanberger. I met her. She's become a friend over the past few years. She, ran as a first when she ran for Congress and defeated Dave Bratt in 2018. She ran as a moderate. She actually did not initially support the aforementioned Nancy Pelosi in her race, but she ran a campaign where she brought together not only Democrats, but independents and moderates, and ended up getting a 15-point win, very consequential win all across Virginia. Every county in Virginia moved to the left, but this was really a center-left win. And the whole ticket won. Lieutenant Governor, I think, won by 12 points, I guess it was. And there was quite a bit of a scandal on the AG ticket, but he managed to win by, I believe, over 6 points. But even more significant, was the gain of 13 seats in the House of Delegates, which was, I think, a surprise even to the Speaker, who early in the evening was talking about, we're going to gain at least 4 seats in the House of Delegates, and ended the night with 13. So that it went from 51 seats, 51-49, really a 50-50 split in the House of Delegates, now to having a supermajority. So Abigail Spanberger will go in with a big win. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll talk about New Jersey, but, people were going in saying, I think everyone knew that Abigail was going to have a good night, but they weren't sure about the other races. So obviously that was a big win. But even Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey with her, I guess, 13, maybe it might be 14 points by now, win, a big win there. So just a big win for, I think, center-left, really moderate moms. Abigail's a mom of 3. Mikey Sherrill, mom of 4. I think they were both, as an oldest daughter myself. I like seeing these oldest daughters, moderate moms out there who really ran like kind of get her done campaigns, really focused on issues and focusing on their own states and focusing on how they could, kind of get back to issue-focused campaigns. It was kind of an exciting but normal election night. Kind of in keeping with our aforementioned leaders, Dick Cheney and Nancy Pelosi. Take your pick of which leader you want, but kind of more normal politics than maybe we've been used to lately.
And at the end of the conversation, I want to go back to Dick Cheney and Nancy Pelosi, two veterans of the House. And so we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's just stay in Virginia, if we could, for just a moment. And then Congressman Israel, I'll get to you. Part of the equation in 2025 is what impact it will have on redistricting in 2026. We've seen what happened in Texas, California, the after effects in Indiana, Missouri, maybe Maryland, and potentially Virginia. Is that now in play when it comes to redistricting in the Commonwealth?
Well, before, I guess just the week before the election, they did. Virginia is a state that had voted for for having nonpartisan redistricting, and they had redistricted, but they went in and had a vote. I'm not sure of all the technicalities on it, but said they were just going to have a temporary redistricting because of what Texas has done, what North Carolina has done, the partisan redistricting, where they went in with the legislature did it, not letting it be for a vote. And what Virginia is doing is they voted the week before, and both the House and the Senate put it up for a vote, and they voted to allow for redistricting, redraw the lines. But they also have to come back after the election and go in next year, when they have another session, because they have to do it in between elections. So they will have to go in January and also have another vote with the newly reconstructed House, the 64 vote House, and vote on it again. The governor doesn't have any role in this. It's just the House and Senate that get to vote. And then they put it up for a vote for the people. See, unlike Texas and North Carolina, where the legislature just votes on it, in Virginia, as with California, the people get to have a referendum on this. So then they have to wait for 90 days, then put it up for a vote in Virginia. Then we, the people, will get to decide if we want to reconfigure our House seats, and then they will put some maps together. But even with that, even if they, either if they decide not to do that or if the people don't vote for it, Abigail Spanberger won the district that is the first district that is now held by a Republican, and also won the second district, which is one of the competitive districts. And I'm not sure about the fifth district that is currently held by a Republican, but I think she became pretty close to winning that. So the three seats that may be redrawn, she came pretty close to win. Well, she won two, maybe won three, or came close to it. So even without redistricting, those people are already announcing they're going to run and came pretty close to, so they're going to be competitive either way. So it was that good of a night that whether or not they redraw those districts, it's going to be a tough year next year for Republicans.
So let's bring Steve Israel into the conversation. And Congressman, thank you for being with us. Let's talk about redistricting, what Barbara Comstock was talking about in Virginia, and also the other big story, the massive win for the Democrats in California for Proposition 50, and how that then affects, I basically call that the first battle in the 2026 midterm election campaign.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you, Steve, for moderating. And to my former colleague, Barbara, thank you for your leadership of the former members of Congress. These days, I think former members are the happiest members of Congress that I know. Look, we're in a redistricting arms race right now, but I have to say, I think it's a race to the bottom. I mean, Congress is already so factionalized. Districts are so far to the left or the right that the center is just not holding. And so when Texas Republicans decide that they're going to unilaterally add 5 seats, to expect Democrats just to sit back is naive, particularly when you have such a slim margin. I mean, this could be 6 to 8 seats could decide whether the gavel is in the hands of the Democrats or the Republicans. And so Democrats have chosen to fight back. They don't believe in unilateral disarmament. And so now you have California, which equalizes it. But as Barbara said, now you have other states, other Republican states who are trying to alter the maps in the mid-decade, and then Democratic states, including my state of New York. Some result of all this may be good for one party or the other, but it's bad for democracy. It continues to push districts to the far left, far right, where members don't wake up in the morning fearing that they're going to be defeated by somebody from the opposite party. They fear that they're going to be defeated by a primary opponent further to the left or right. And they go further in that direction. I'm hoping, I know this sounds naive, Steve and Barbara, but at some point, I'm hoping that somebody's going to call a truce to this.
Let's call the whole thing off, and maybe Texas can cancel it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you know what? Texas got 5. Looks like California got 5. Okay, fair fight. Let's end it here, because it's certainly not good for democracy. And let me just end this by saying, why is this happening? Right. So why now? Why now? It's because the Republicans realized that they're in a highly negative partisan environment, that the president's party loses an average of 24 seats in every first midterm. There's only been 3 exceptions to that in the past 100 years, and that they had to do something, as unfair as it was, in order to try and run up their score. So they turned to Texas saying, all right, give us 5. When you have that slim a majority, 5 seats may be just enough. What they didn't count on is that Gavin Newsom was going to say, I'll see you and raise you. And now we're in this kind of this real arms race for seats based on a Sharpie drawing maps and not on the typical campaign fights that we've seen in the past.
So, Congressman, let me stay with you for just a moment because you really hit the essence of, I think, what is at stake. We have an audience interested in politics, but also interested in policy. So imagine that either party has a narrow majority in 2027, regardless if it's the Democrats or the Republicans. And let's say it's less than 10 seats. And you have more of these gerrymandered districts. What impact will that have in 2027 when it comes to the incentive or lack thereof for the two parties to cross the aisle and work on some of the big issues that need to be addressed?
Well, I'm sure Barbara has an opinion on this as well. The incentive is not to agree, but to disagree. When you're in an environment where you get beaten up in a ruby red district or a bright blue district, you get beaten up for cooperating with somebody in the other party. There's no incentive. It's just disincentive. Every time you work with the other party to get something done, to compromise, you increase the risk of getting a primary. You give your primary opponent some fodder. And let me give you a data point on this, and I'd love to hear Barbara's perspective as well, because she went through it. She was a moderate Republican, represented a fairly moderate district. My district was also very moderate. When I was elected in 2000 from Long Island, there were about 125 moderate districts across the country where bipartisanship was in our stump speeches. Crossing the other aisle was a value that we campaigned on. Today, during this webinar, the true number of pure competitive seats where you can campaign on bipartisanship is probably less than 25. Maybe depend on the environment, maybe another 5 or 10. But that's it. It's gone from 125 to 25. And now we have the latest news, another headline this week that Jared Golden, a very moderate Democratic congressman from Maine, he's leaving because that guy gets beaten up no matter what he does. If he votes with the Trump administration, 48% of his district punishes him. And if he votes against the Trump administration, the other 48% of his district punishes him. So how can we expect to get anything done, to get any kind of compromise on big issues, when that kind of consensus building becomes such a massive disincentive to getting reelected?
So, Barbara, let's turn to you because, as Congressman Israel pointed out, you come from a purple district. You ran and governed as a moderate. What are your concerns about how all of this collectively affects the institution of the House?
Well, I'd point out my district is not purple anymore, and that's been a result of the Trump effect. On election night, oddly enough, Winsome Sears went to Loudoun County, which was a large part of my district, thinking it was going to be like some kind of winning county for her. She had spent a big part of her campaign, actually most of her ads, I think the vast majority of her ads were spent running on the transgender issue, and a lot in Loudoun County. And she thought that was going to be a big winning issue. Her last $4 million that the RGA gave to her, she spent on the transgender issue and attacking Abigail Spanberger on it, who very reasonably said, let's let parents and localities work on that together. Let's be reasonable on that, the way schools and families had always worked on that. And that county, that suburban area that Fox News would tell you is some kind of hotbed of right-wing things, went 65-35 for Abigail Spanberger, 65-35. So, there you have it. I won that county by 10 points when I was running on the economy and running on supporting our federal employees, opposing government shutdowns, saying that's a bad thing, it costs money, supporting our veterans, supporting, our defense contractors, and supporting, our national security. And when you turned on, when you had this bizarre campaign that Winsome Sears ran, and for some reason was funded by the RGA in this bizarre way, you turned it 2-1, lost a swing county like that. So, this is this is not the Republican Party that I knew is disappeared. But, you get back to, I'll give you an example of a Republican who's running reasonably is, Kelly Ayotte up in New Hampshire this year. She vetoed a book banning bill that, that she has there's a very narrow Republican, I think, majority up there. She vetoed a book banning bill. She vetoed a bathroom bill that was, wasn't a, it was kind of a silly bill. So, and she's focusing on the economy and focusing on, kitchen table, bread and butter issues like Governor Sununu did before her. And, I think and she's also saying, I'm not going to redistrict, there's only 2 districts there in New Hampshire, and she's not redrawing them because she's actually going to be up next year because the governor up there is every 2 years. So she's very center right, very sensible. She was a very sensible senator. She unfortunately lost her seat when Donald Trump kind of came in and ran her up, but she's kept, in the sensible center right. And, I think is a Republican who has a future, unlike, a lot of the Republicans that Trump has been running off the rails. So, I think that's, I think the future for Republicans is going to come from the states, from people like Kelly Ayotte, because right now Republicans in Congress aren't allowed to do anything. Hence, the House has been closed for how many days? 100 and whatever we're on.
It may seem like 100, but it's been since September 19th, and clearly no plans
they
to.
Have, of the past 100 whatever days, they've only been open some,
Yeah.
however many, but. And you need to get it open. People, we're going into Thanksgiving, and we need, we need to have our airports open. It's hurting the economy. It's, it's dangerous. It's just, we need to, get people back to work. And the government employees are not, are the people who protect the president, that protect Congress, our veterans. They aren't getting their paychecks. And I know in this area, somebody gave me a call today, and she said, she was reading things off from our local listservs around here of families who are going to food banks around here, because you have families who are 2-income government families here who you can't miss 2 paychecks and try and pay your mortgage and still be able, to put food on the table. These are real, these are real issues here. And, they're surprised they are losing. Actually, in Fairfax County, Winsome Sears lost every single precinct except one where she barely won by 51%. And it was a precinct that I think used to be probably close to a 70% precinct.
Wow.
We've done. So, you got to get back to those kitchen table issues and focusing, cost of living, affordability, things that are just actually things that Donald Trump said he was going to run on last year. And now he's saying now he's doing things like destroying the East Wing and giving $40 billion to Argentina, but not being able to find money to deal with the health insurance that people are concerned about. And that's not just a concern of Democrats when they're saying, that's a concern of Susan Collins, who's going to have a tough race next year. It's a concern
Mhm.
it should be a concern of people in a lot of the red states, right, Steve? Because that's where more of the people who are on the exchanges live. I mean, people on
Right.
the exchanges aren't so much on the healthcare. The exchanges are small business people. They're farmers. I mean, boy, and the farmers and those tariffs are crushing farmers. And I tell you, Abigail Spanberger went into rural Virginia more than any recent candidate, and she talked about tariffs are taxes. And they are. I mean, I'm a Jack Kemp Republican. I'm a George Allen Republican. George Allen is on that Supreme Court case that was argued this week. And tariffs are taxes, and we're paying them. And the people who are paying them are on the bottom of the income spectrum more than the high income. And that hurts.
So let me jump in, remind our audience that we would love your questions as well. And so you can put them in the chat. Abigail Kate will then get those questions to me. So we appreciate it. Again, we're talking to Republican Barbara Comstock and Democrat Steve Israel. Congressman Israel, let me put a couple of numbers on the table. 41%, that is the average approval rating of President Trump right now, according to Real Clear Politics. Back in 2017, he was at 37%. So clearly, the Trump factor is going to be part of the equation for the Democrats. I think you would agree, though, that for the Democrats to win, they cannot run just against Donald Trump. They've got to run for something. If that's correct, if you could take it from there.
Yeah. So first of all, let's just reflect on that history for a moment. Midterm elections are always referenda on the president, on the sitting president, always. As I said before, only 3 times in the past 100 years has a midterm electorate added seats to the president's party. That was under Roosevelt, FDR, his first midterm. People did not want restraints on him. They didn't want opposition to his policies. They wanted him to continue those policies. It happened again in 1998, Bill Clinton's midterm. When people thought that the economy was doing well, there was mobility, people had hope and opportunity, and they felt that Newt Gingrich had gone too far. And then it happened on behalf of George W. Bush in 2004. I was running in that midterm as a Democrat. People did not want Democrats to put constraints on his policies with respect to Afghanistan and elsewhere. And so he picked up seats. But that was it. In every other midterm for the past 100 years, people want checks and balances. Average loss is 24 seats. Having said that, although this environment very much reminds me of the 2018 midterm, highly negative partisan, blowback against Trump, as Barbara said, despair that he's not done anything on the economy, that he's focusing on the wrong issues, and on those issues he's going too far. Very reflective of the 2018 midterm when the Democrats flipped the House and took the gavel. What we are learning is that you cannot just campaign against Donald Trump. You have to have a vision and resonance with voters. And in my view, and I think in Barbara's view too, you win at the center. What Abigail Spanberger has taught us, what Mikey Sherrill has taught us, what Democrats across the country have taught us, with the exception of this guy named Mamdani, and I have a feeling he will come up in this conversation. What they've all taught us is that independent swing voters, including voters who voted for Donald Trump and have some remorse now, they don't want another extreme to balance the extreme. They want common sense. They want a right of center or left of center agenda. And they want to know that that agenda is going to address the anxieties that they have about the economy, about food prices, about their wages. And so I think that I hope my party has learned the lessons from this past election on what kind of candidate wins in those kind of purple districts. And will advance those kinds of common sense policies in order to win over voters who do have some remorse towards President Trump.
So with all of that, Steve Israel, whether it's the ballroom and, as Barbara mentioned, the demolition of the East Wing of the White House, or aid to Argentina, or family involved in crypto business and some of the blurring of the lines between the Trump children and these outside businesses, military tensions, potentially Nigeria and Venezuela. All of these are issues that are percolating 10 months into the Trump presidency. At the end of the day, as you look ahead, and again, a lot will happen between now and November of next year, what do you think, as somebody who understands and has led the effort for Democrats to win the House, what's going to drive the election next year?
Well, the midterm election is going to be driven not nationally, but in those 25 to 35 competitive districts. And so let's make sure that we're focusing on what independent and swing voters are thinking about in those districts. What are they thinking about in the Virginia 1 and 2? Right, which are competitive districts. What are they thinking about in Pennsylvania, in the Scranton area, which is a competitive district, or a Philadelphia suburban district that a Republican represents that's going to be competitive, or the two competitive districts in Arizona? Each of those districts, and this is super important, I know Barbara knows it well, each of those districts has their own media market. Each of those districts have their own issues that are priorities to swing voters. And so Democrats can win those districts if they recruit the right kind of candidates who resonate in those media markets. In New York, Zoran Mamdani has shown us he's generational talent. He's shown us how you win Brooklyn, New York. But we've got to win in a midterm, Brooklyn, Iowa, in order to take the majority. And so we've got to have a very strategic and highly local set of issues and candidates. One other thing I will say on this is that right now, a lot of the pundits are predicting a wave election based on the environment and based on the results. First of all, I never like to base any assessment of a campaign on the one that just happened. You got to look forward to campaigns and not just rest all your eggs on what's just happened. But just aren't that enough competitive districts right now to have a pickup of 66 seats for the Democrats or 30 seats. So, if there's a wave, it's going to be a wavelet. That's number one. Number two, Trump has extraordinary amounts of money already that he's going to put into the midterms. And so Democrats have work to do on fundraising to offset that. So you put those two together, a narrower competitive battlefield of House seats and the money advantage that Trump has, that I think the DCCC will be able to offset. And you have to predict, if you're going to predict, you have to predict that whether it's the Republicans retain control or the Democrats regain control, we're looking at a net of maybe 8 to 12 seats that decide that. And hard to imagine that this will be one of those 2006 elections where the Democrats picked up over 35 seats, 2010 elections where the Republicans picked up 60.
It's an incredible analysis. One other point on this, and I'll come to you, Barbara. You mentioned the mayor-elect of New York City. Republicans are going to try to make him the face of the Democrats in congressional races. Will that affect the politics of the races? Will that have an impact? Or do people look at New York City very differently than, Brooklyn, Iowa?
Two things, concisely. First, it depends on how he governs. If he governs responsibly and he's not in the headlines in Brooklyn, Iowa, nobody's going to remember his name. If he governs radically and creates a national narrative, well, then, Republicans will be able to fuel that narrative. And the second thing I would say is that I would draw concentric circles of impact around the Mamdani influence. Yes, impact in two congressional districts on Long Island, where I live, two very competitive districts, because they're in the media market. And people in those districts, they commute to New York City. So pronounced impact in those districts. As you get further afield, as you get into districts, even in upstate New York, in Pennsylvania, certainly Arizona, California, the further away from New York you get and the further away from this election you get, the less of an impact, the more negligible the impact is, if any.
Barbara, your thoughts on all of this? Go ahead, please.
And I think what happens is for Democrats, you're able to be more your own person these days. Like I said, Abigail was able to say, listen, I didn't vote for Nancy Pelosi for speaker, or I disagree with my party on this or that. Republicans these days have to get the imprimatur and blessing of Donald Trump. I mean, look at North Carolina, where They cleared the field for this guy who's running against Roy Cooper. Now, Roy Cooper is a moderate Democrat who's, been governor for 2 terms, very popular. He's not, you can't paint him as Mamdani, so they may go in there and say that they're going to try and run the same kind of silly, like they tried to, pull that kind of stuff on Mikey Sherrill. And, they're going to do that with everybody because this is what a lot of the consultants do. They try and just play the playbook. They'll say, don't California, Virginia, or don't California, North Carolina, or they do that because they're lazy. That's part of the problem with the super PACs. They run the same ads against everybody. But when you have somebody like a Roy Cooper, who's genuinely a good candidate and fits the district and is North Carolina, and then you have, can't remember the guy's name, who's the Republican, who's never run statewide and is a first-time candidate, who's not very
Former party chair.
Yeah. He's not going to be a very good candidate. So good candidates matter. And the problem for Republicans right now is you aren't allowed to be a good local candidate who's your own brand and does your own thing and stands up for what's good for your state or your district. That's not allowed in this party. Even if Trump were to allow it, a lot of the MAGA people don't allow it. You could have Tucker Carlson come in and attack you. You could have all these MAGA people attack you. So they've created these monsters now within the party that'll attack you, even if Trump gives you a pass these days. So there's a real problem within the party now and the construct of the party that, really creates problems beyond even Trump. Look what happened in 2022. You had all these candidates. Look in Georgia, we keep creating all these problems. And we've lost 2 Senate seats in Georgia, 2 Senate seats, the Kerry Lake problem in Arizona. We keep losing in these states where we should win because they require, not just Trump requires loyalty, but these MAGA parties in swing states. Pennsylvania, listen, Governor Shapiro is going to win double digits and probably sweep in congressional candidates underneath there because these weak congressional MAGA candidates who are in there who've been totally loyal to Trump, supported his tariffs, supported all of his policies, are not going to be able to survive with a double-digit Shapiro win and a weak top of the ticket. Because
Steve, let's go across
people.
Yeah. Let's go across the Hudson. I want to get your sense of New Jersey and a little bit of context because back in 2016, Trump lost New Jersey by double digits.
Oh.
And in 2024, he lost it by only 6. So people saying, oh, maybe New Jersey's becoming a little bit purple. There were 5 counties that Trump carried in 2024. All of them flipped to Mikey Sherrill in 2025. That tells you what?
Well, it tells us that a centrist candidate, even slightly left of center candidate, who's talking about the right issues, cost of commuting, cost of groceries, cost of living, traffic, wins in those kind of media markets. She talked a little bit about Donald Trump, but she didn't need to because Donald Trump keeps talking about Donald Trump. He's creating his own narrative. So he's giving Democrats a gift every time he sends $40 billion to Argentina and then says there's not enough money for air traffic controllers at our airports. He writes the narrative. And so that gave her space to talk about issues that count. Now, New Jersey is a purple state. Absolutely a purple state. It's possible that Sherrill Sherrill, her platform and her campaign operations have kind of stabilized the drift of New Jersey voters to Republicans. Not that they won, not that Republicans won, but Phil Murphy had a really tight race. The incumbent governor had a very tight race. But it's possible that she has shown Democrats how you can stabilize that drift and bring those voters back. That's exactly what she did on Tuesday night.
And Jack Ciattarelli, obviously he ran as the Trump candidate. He embraced Donald Trump.
The full and total endorsement. That's what you always have to have. That was the ad that killed the Attorney General up here in Northern Virginia. Yeah. That ad that said he had the full and total endorsement. Even for Republicans who he was the reasonable candidate, that was a killer.
Well, Steve Israel, the Gateway Project, which is a huge, huge issue in your neck of the woods,
Yeah.
and the Republican nominee saying, I support Trump in his move because there's a lot of corruption. I mean, I'm just wondering, all politics is local, and if you live in New Jersey, this is important to you if you have to work in Midtown Manhattan.
If you live in New, I remember what really turned the tide against Governor, oh gosh.
Chris Christie.
Yeah, thank you. Chris Christie is when he shut down the bridge, in retaliation. That was just fatal to him and New Jersey Republicans. And this was like, let's try that experiment again. And let's talk about why it's a good idea for Donald Trump to delete funding for a vitally important infrastructure project that would get New Jerseyans into New York City cleaner, faster, less expensive. That kind of loyalty to Donald Trump. It's as if Ciattarelli was running in Alabama, and he thought that the way to win is just to keep endorsing Donald Trump. That may work in Alabama. It's not working in those purple states, moderate states in New Jersey. I thought that really hurt him.
A lot of questions, so bear with me as I read them. And Barbara, this first one is going to be for you. Do you think that the Democratic sweep on Tuesday will help or hurt when it comes to these ongoing negotiations for the shutdown? We're now in record territory. We're dealing with massive delays. Today alone, several thousand flights have been delayed or canceled. We're heading into the busy travel season of Thanksgiving, and at the moment, nothing but stalemate. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's Trump just like shutting down the, traffic into New York City. It's like saying, okay, we're going to shut down the airports and somehow that's a threat that's going to do what? I mean, you have to bring everyone to the table. That's what President Art of the Deal needs to do, and say, okay, what do we need to do to get to 60 votes? Clearly, somebody like Susan Collins, who's going to have a tough race next year, wants to do something about health care. They need to spend more money on the exchanges. That's the issue that Democrats want to deal with, but it's also an issue. I mean, listen, Democrats that I've talked to say, listen, if they do that, that's going to help Republicans, a lot of the Republicans in swing districts,
Exactly right.
in these tough districts next year. If they don't do it, it's going to make it easier for Democrats to win next year. So it's kind of crazy that they don't do it. But the problem there is, as Steve pointed out, there's so few swing districts that you have a lot of these red districts that just don't care. And they don't realize that it's their own people. I don't know. I can't imagine they aren't hearing it from their own people at this point. Like if you're in West Virginia, if you're in the Speaker's District, if you're in Tennessee or Kentucky, these are your people whose premiums are going up. I don't know why you aren't answering your phones and hearing that yet, but for some reason, it's not connecting yet. It's like they're going to need to lose their seats too. I mean, some of the people who lost here in Virginia were people who hadn't had real races in a long time. And do you need to lose your seat next year before you're going to do it? I would hope they'd look and see numbers and say, no, I've got all these people who need this health care. Let's do it. So I don't know who's talking to them. I just would think this isn't a lot of money compared to the 40 billion for Argentina. They should do things like the exchange money. And obviously food stamps are required by law, so let's just get those kind of things done, come to the table and do the things that are going to get the deal done and open up the government. And the market did badly. It's been doing badly all week. That's not good for Trump. It's not good for the economy. He was earlier this week saying, oh, the market has doubled. It hasn't doubled. It was doing a lot better last year and the year before under Joe Biden. We all know that. We have 401ks, and the grocery prices are still going up. He needs to have a deal. And so does, even the Senate seats are starting. If you look at some of the Senate seats are going to look a little tougher. And I don't know what his pollsters are telling him, because the ones in Pennsylvania, and the ones in Virginia and New Jersey were really wrong. So if they're just going to keep lying to these guys, I don't know.
Can I
Steve
ask,
Israel. Oh, yeah,
I
please go
just,
ahead.
let me
Yes.
just build on that. And so, as Barbara does, I talk to my former colleagues on both sides of the aisle frequently. And see, what I'm hearing is that both sides are now in that phase of, okay, what's the exit strategy? Like looking for a way to end this on favorable terms. I don't know whether the results of the elections this week kind of gives the Democrats a sense of momentum and a sense that they have now a disincentive to make a deal. But I do think that both sides do recognize. I'm talking about the Republicans and Democrats in the Senate do recognize that there needs to be an off ramp. I'm just not sure that President Trump recognizes that there needs to be an off ramp. And by the way, he specifically said that the reason that Republicans did so poorly on Tuesday was because of the shutdown. Well, if you're saying that the shutdown cost you seats and cost you elections, I would just get everybody into the Oval Office and figure out a way out.
And it's not, it does remind me a lot of 18. And the problem is, Steve pointed out, there's fewer swing seats. So that means there's fewer people who really see the benefit of it opening.
Right.
But the problem is it just keeps getting worse if you don't open it. So, you know, it is, you know, they're not, they don't wake up because it's not a problem if you're Jim Jordan or if you're AOC, because
Right.
it's not going to impact your race, but it's going to impact who's in the majority. So, so the problem is the guys who are going to lose their seats need to bang on each of their own parties, but those are an increasingly smaller group on each side. So trying to convince your own party, hey, you're going to lose, is hard, because each side doesn't, the Democrats don't believe their small little group and the Republicans don't believe their small little group. And each side would rather not have those little swing voters because they all, the left wants to have more leftists and the right want to have more right. So they're kind of, hey, leave us alone. We'd rather have, they like the gerrymandering
Sure.
more of their own.
So, Steve Israel, I want to go back. A lot of attention on what happened in Virginia, California, New York City, New Jersey. But as Barbara mentioned, 13 new Democratic seats in the Virginia House of Delegates. Something else that caught my eye: Mississippi, which is about as ruby red as they come. Two state Senate seats flipping to the Democrats, meaning that the Republicans do not have a supermajority in Mississippi. As you look at something like that, again, in an off election year, what does that tell you?
Oh gosh, these are absolutely like blinking red lights for Republicans. This is like break the glass time. Look, I mentioned before, we're in a negative partisan environment. It's typical. But we're seeing energy for Democrats across the country and very far down ballot. If I were the Republicans, if I were Speaker Johnson, and if I were, I chaired the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, but if I were chairing the NRCC, man, I'd be looking at those down ballot races and trying to figure out what we need to do to correct them. We're looking at like nuclear energy, nuclear powered energy for Democrats across the country. And a lot of disaffected Republicans who couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Republican in this year. And if they have the same position, the same sentiment next year, then you're looking at an exceptionally good midterm within the confines of the available seats.
So, to that point, one of the questions from the audience: how important is it for Democratic candidates to have backgrounds, including in the military or intelligence? Certainly, Mikey Sherrill is a Navy graduate. Go Navy, beat Army. Just have to get that out there. And Abigail Spanberger with her CIA background, her intelligence background. Steve Israel, what do you think?
When I chaired the D trip when I was doing recruiting for none other than Rahm Emanuel, we really focused on veterans. We focused on people with national security cred. The beef on Democrats had historically been that we were weak on national security. We put a premium on recruiting candidates at all levels who reflected muscularity on national security issues. We're in a volatile world, and I think that kind of credibility is very important. Having said that, it doesn't disqualify. I mean, if you're a farmer running in a rural farm ag district, you may not, that Democratic candidate needs to speak eloquently and passionately about ag issues and doesn't have to have a military background, but it certainly is an enhanced value.
And Barbara, let me go back to what Steve Israel was saying in terms of if he were running the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. My question, do you think that Donald Trump, the Trump White House, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune will adjust in light of the returns from this past week, change policies, change direction?
I hope so for the country's sake. I mean, I would hope so for the party's sake too. But I think certainly, you're seeing anonymously sourced stories. I saw one in Politico today saying they're getting a little antsy. I think particularly in the Midwest, where the tariffs are really hitting the farmers hard, they're really suffering a recession. Don Bacon, who's retiring, is talking about how hard hit the farmers are in the recession there in Nebraska, Iowa, and those are some really tough seats there. So I think you're seeing some push to change the narrative here. So I you hope they'll I think if the court comes down against these tariffs, that would be a big help for the House. It would save Trump from himself because these tariffs are a disaster. You think of here we are fighting with Canada, one of our best allies. When we don't need to be, that would really save the Midwest, and that would probably help a lot of Republicans.
And Steve, a couple of open seats in the Senate. Let's talk about, for example, you have an open seat in New Hampshire, an open seat in Michigan. You have the Democrats trying to defend states like Georgia. You have the Republicans trying to defend states like Maine. As you look at a year out to the Senate races and what it means for the Democrats and the Republicans, what's your assessment?
Harder path in the Senate, but look, it's becoming a little bit more viable. You've got 5 toss-up races in the Senate, 3 on the Dem side, 2 on the Republican side, Collins in Maine, and then an open in North Carolina. And so that's rather competitive. I have to say, at the beginning of this cycle, people were saying Senate's out of bounds for Democrats. There's just no path. I believe that Democrats are beginning to see a path. As Barbara said before, Maine could be highly problematic for the Republicans. North Carolina could be problematic for the Republicans. Those seats will very much be in play, particularly with Roy Cooper in the race. And then you've got, New Hampshire, which is kind of a lean race, and Ohio with Sherrod Brown in that race. I think those are competitive as well. What that all means is that I wouldn't discount the chances of the Democrats taking the majority in the Senate if this is the kind of environment that we saw in 2010 for the Republicans, 2006 for the Democrats.
Because the whole focus
So, Barbara,
is on gerrymandering the seats, and you can't gerrymander
exactly.
the Senate.
That's right.
So you're kind of stuck, then you're just stuck with people just mad. Say if these tariffs stick, you've got Michigan, and Michigan is suffering.
Iowa.
We have an open seat in Iowa.
Iowa.
Joni Ernst had to, retired because she was, it was not going well. The governor is retired there. And boy, I'll tell you, the young man who is the auditor, who's the Democrat, listen to him. He sounds just like Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, what he's doing in Iowa. He's going around and just talking about Iowa, local. And you wouldn't know if you listened to him whether he's a Democrat or Republican, because he's just talking about local, what can I do for Iowa? And he's already won twice statewide, and he's a former prosecutor. The Senate's lucky he's running for governor instead of Senate, because I think he's going to win.
And look at Tellerico in Texas, by the way. I mean, Democrats have a really good bench that resonates locally.
Well,
I would be taking a look at him as well.
And if they vote for Ken Paxton in the primary instead of John Cornyn, then all bets are off. I mean, Paxton is so horrible.
So perhaps a divided Republican Party in Texas. So let's fast forward to January 2027. And I want to put just a hypothetical on the table. And Steve Israel, I'll begin with you. Democrats have a narrow majority in the House, and they're able to recapture the Senate. Donald Trump faced two impeachments in his first term. What's the agenda moving forward for the Democrats? Some may want to impeach him again on the left. What's your message to the party?
Look, unless he's willing to subvert the Constitution, he ain't running again. So I think what Democrats need to do is focus on what got them elected. And at the end of the day, what will have gotten them elected to the majority is people wanting two things: a better economy, lower prices, better quality of life in one bucket, and checks and balances. They don't want unrestrained government. As far apart as we seem in our politics, most of us are actually in the center. Most of us believe in checks and balances. Most of us don't want the government to go too far, either to the left or the right. And so I hope that the Democrats, if they take the majority in the House and or the Senate, will govern accordingly.
And Barbara, more immediately, one of the questions from one of the audience members is what we're dealing with today. When will Republicans in leadership in the House and in the Senate take back the authority that Congress has on tariffs and other issues?
Well, I certainly hope soon. I mean, tariffs are taxes, and Congress should be the only one doing taxes. So hopefully they will, recognize their Article 1 authority again soon, whether it's Democrats or Republicans in control. So I hope that will be very soon, with or without the Supreme Court's help. And, I think, as with anybody, you should do what you ran on. So if you're running on affordability, cost of living, you should sit there with your checklist and start passing those bills that were on your checklist. Do that first. Now, I do think, we haven't talked about it, but I do think there should be oversight on things like, what Homeland Security is out of control, and we haven't talked about that, but I think a lot of the movement on the Hispanic vote away from Republicans, after Republicans had tried so hard to win some of that vote over, is because of this horror that we're seeing of masked men dragging people out of their cars, dragging them out of Home Depot and preschools, and just all these terrible things in the Catholic Church, which I'm a member of, and the Pope trying to say, what the heck are you doing? This violates all of our principles. It also happens to violate the law. So there needs to be oversight on that and a check on the insane things that Kristi Noem is doing that are just off the charts, not legal. And she doesn't know what she's doing. So I don't know what has happened to her. It's terrible. So there does need to be oversight there, but if whoever's in charge needs to do their checklist on affordability and getting things back under control, getting in the center and focusing on the economy and getting that back in shape. And hopefully working together, like sitting down and doing things, I think if you have some more governors, and I do think you're going to see leadership from the states, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. When I look to where I think you're going to get a future Republican Party, it's going to be Republicans getting elected at the state level and doing some smart governing and smart policies, because that's what you need to do and show that you can lead and answer people's everyday problems there. And so hopefully you'll see some more of that in Congress, but if you see more of that at the state level, maybe that'll inspire Congress to do a little bit more of it too.
So final lightning round, not holding you to this a year out, but Barbara Comstock, in 2027, who has the House, Democrats or Republicans?
I think Democrats will have the House.
Who has the Senate?
I would be inclined, I think it'll be a closer margin, but maybe 51-52 Republican.
Steve Israel, same thing.
I said the Mets would win the World Series in 4 games, so I'm not the guy to make these predictions. I would say, barring any real tricks with redistricting, barring any calamity for Democrats with Republicans just running up the score with redistricting, I think the environment favors Democrats just based on history in the House. I think it's also, I agree with Barbara, a tougher path for Democrats in the Senate, but doable.
And I'll point out for the economy, you think when Bill Clinton had divided government, the economy did better. We balanced the budget. Even when he was getting impeached, we had the economy go through. So if Donald Trump wants to end on a good note and have the economy, go gangbusters, divided government usually gets that done. So, we could have a good situation in that scenario. and business will do very well when everyone has to cooperate and get together that way.
So let me, if I can, spend the final moment concluding where we began. And Barbara Comstock, you certainly knew Dick Cheney. He was a veteran of the House, elected in 1978, served as the youngest chief of staff with President Gerald R. Ford, defense secretary, and of course, vice president for 8 years under George W. Bush. What impact do you think he had on the office of the vice presidency?
I think he was probably the most impactful vice president in our lifetime, certainly strengthened that office. And I think he was, because he was there not wanting to run for president, he was a very trusted, vice president, because he wasn't there for any other reason than to do the job, and kind of set the marker for future vice presidents of strengthening that role. And certainly, he was a policy person and a very serious and a patriot statesman. And then certainly in his post vice presidency, as he was a advisor to his daughter, wrote very good books with his daughter, who then also was in leadership in Congress, and certainly with January 6th committee and his role that he played with her in that role. Again, quite the statesman, and we are indebted to him for his great leadership.
And Steve Israel, the other news this week, of course.
He put country above party, always.
Thank you for that. Steve Israel, Nancy Pelosi stepping down, 37 years in the House. John Lawrence has a piece in the New York Times today calling her a political giant. You worked with her. She governed with a velvet sword, as people have said in the past. Your assessment of her tenure in the House and her decision to step down?
The most consequential Democrat in 50 years of politics. I had the privilege of spending more time with her than most House Democrats because I chaired the DCCC. So 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings a day. Most people I know love her, some loathe her, but I don't know of anybody who doesn't recognize and acknowledge her ability to just get stuff done no matter what the odds. We would not have an Affordable Care Act had it not been for Nancy Pelosi. And more important, final thing I'll say on this, because she used to remind me of it almost every day, more important than winning is why we win. And she was driven every day by that one consequential question that she would ask me and others: what does this mean for the 1 in 7 children born into poverty and hunger in the United States? That's what drove her and gave her that spirit. I was just watching history every time I would meet with her.
And she knew how to count votes. She
Oh my
knew
God.
how to twist arms. How did she do that?
So I'll say this. You walk into her office, and there were always 2 things that she displayed prominently. First, a bowl of chocolates from Ghirardelli Chocolates in her district, but nearby, a stack of bats from her beloved San Francisco Giants. And maybe I was just overreading this, but to me, what she was saying was, we can do this the sweet way, or we can do this the hard way, but we're going to do it. And she would wear you down. She would be in that room with you until she got you to do what you needed to do.
So I assume you took the chocolate, not the bat.
Oh, I think I have been subject to both at various times.
Steve Israel, thank you. Democrat from New York, Barbara Comstock, Republican from Virginia, and the president of the former Members of Congress Association. To both of you, thanks for your insight. To all who have been watching and listening, thanks for your questions. We appreciate it, and we would love to do this again.
Thank you.